Ever since its creation in 1936, the NFL Draft has gone through numerous changes but has remained a staple every year where fans get excited or enraged about the potential future of their team. The amount of rounds has changed many times, but since 1994, it's consisted of 7 total rounds, and since 2010 has used a 3-day format. The biggest thing that has changed outside of the amount of rounds and picks has been how they were used. Up until recent years, the norm has been something like this. Day 1 picks, or first rounders, have been expected to contribute the minute they step on the field. Guys that were the best in college, not only on their team, but across the entire nation. If they didn't succeed right away, or at least in the first 2 to 3 years, they would be released, traded, or not re-signed after their rookie deal ended. For day 2 picks, second and third rounders, it varied. Many players, like Eric Weddle, who finished his rookie season with 53 tackles, 6 pass breakups, a sack, and a pick in 15 starts, or Lance Briggs, who finished his with 78 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and a pick 6, were expected to be and were instant impact players. On the other hand, players like Chad Ochocinco, who had 28 catches for 329 yards and a touchdown, or Jamal Charles, who had 67 carries for 357 yards, were given playing time in their first year in the league, but the expectations the team had for them were much less. Not quite developmental projects, but players that would take more time to step into the spotlight and reach their potential. Many of these players had either been great players but not superstars in college, or potential first-rounders that had lost draft stock due to injury. Day 3 picks, 4th through 7th rounders, would either get minimal playing time or would not play at all. More often than not, low-risk, high-reward players that showed flashes in college and could potentially develop into solid role players, or even something more, with the biggest example of this being the arguable GOAT, Tom Brady. In the past few years, however, as recent as 2010, the standard of drafting players in the first round that are held to the same expectations as the league best in their first year has somewhat blended with the developmental style drafting that takes place in the later rounds. While many players such as Justin Herbert, Myles Garrett, and Jamar Chase still hold true to this tradition, players like Mike Williams, Rashawn Gary, and Zaven Collins are drafted in the mid to late first round, but in their rookie season and occasionally even their second, they are put onto the back burner, let's say, and given a year or two to adjust to the NFL to properly let their talents shine. All in all, the NFL has evolved greatly in recent years, and the style of drafting that used to only take place in the later rounds has slowly but surely crept up into day 1 and day 2 of the NFL Draft, with many players in rounds 1 through 3 not only taken because of their production in college, but by their just strict talent alone and the amount of potential that NFL teams see in them. Long intro and mini history lesson on the NFL Draft aside, you're probably wondering how the title and thumbnail of this video come into play. Well, in the third round of the 2014 draft, with Adrian Peterson nearing 30 and the end of most running backs' primes, with the 96th pick, the Minnesota Vikings selected all-purpose back Jerick "Jet" McKinnon out of Georgia Southern University to be their next future back. After hitting their last high-round running back pick on the nose with Peterson, they decided to go back to the well with McKinnon, who finished his college career with the third most rushing yards in GSU history, with 3,899, only behind Jermaine Austin with 5,411, and, well, Adrian Peterson, who had 6,599 yards in his illustrious collegiate career. The Vikings' plan was to solidify a run-first offense around Peterson, his long-term backup Matt Asiata, utility player and 2013 first-round pick Cordell Patterson, and hopefully by the end, a bit of McKinnon, to ease rookie quarterback Teddy Bridgewater into the league, as he was slated to take over from Matt Castle within the first few weeks of the season. The plan worked to perfection in Week 1, as the Vikings cruised to a 34-6 victory against the then St. Louis Rams. Castle threw for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns, going 17 for 25 passing. Peterson rushed for 75 yards on 21 carries, Asiata for 10 on 2 carries, and Patterson for a whopping 103 yards on just 3 carries, including a 67-yard rushing touchdown with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. In McKinnon's NFL debut, he was only on the field for a total of 3 snaps and had a single carry for 1 yard, as expected. Before Week 2, however, the entire season was flipped upside down. As everyone knows by now, star running back Adrian Peterson was indicted on child abuse charges and immediately put onto the inactive list for the upcoming Patriots game. Without the centerpiece of their offense and the uncertainty of the rushing game going up against an overall stout defense, they decided to go pass-heavy, and to say that it backfired would be an understatement. Castle and the depleted Minnesota offense got blown out 30-7, and Castle finished with an abysmal line of 19-36 for 202 yards, a touchdown, and 4 interceptions. When they did run the ball, the majority of the carries expectedly went to Asiata, who only totaled 36 yards on 13 carries, just 2 yards per rush. Once again, Jet didn't see much action, and he was on the field for 21 snaps, getting 7 yards on 2 carries and 5 yards on 2 catches. Patterson didn't have a single carry, and this would keep up for the rest of the season, as he ended the year with 117 rushing yards, just gaining 14 more from weeks 2 to 17, excluding the bye week. The following week was against the Saints, and after they reactivated Peterson, he was put onto the commissioner's exempt list and later suspended for the rest of the season. Now, after his performance against the Patriots, the Vikings decided to let rookie Bridgewater lead the team. Castle opened the game, but after going 5 for 10 for only 50 yards, they brought in Teddy Two Gloves. However, things went worse than they had wanted, dropping their second total game in a row 20-10, once again not eclipsing 10 total points. Throughout the entire game, the Saints commanded the time of possession, with the Vikings only running 47 total plays. Jet once again had limited snaps and finished with 2 carries, this time for a negative yard. He did also catch 2 passes for 9 yards, but starting in week 4 against the Falcons, it looked like the future of the Vikings' backfield would emerge quicker than anyone had thought. It was an offensive explosion on both sides that ended in a 41-28 win for Minnesota, with Bridgewater winning his first start and throwing for 317 yards, while rushing for 27 and a touchdown. Asiata once again got the most carries with 20, and finished the game with 78 yards and 3 touchdowns. While it was both the most carries and yards for him on the year so far, he didn't even come close to McKinnon's breakout performance. After catching fire early, he ran the ball 18 times for 135 yards. An unbelievable jump from the 7 total yards he had in his first 3 weeks in the league. His best run of the day was a 55-yard scamper on his first carry of the game, a 1st and 10 from his own 8 in the second quarter. After his exceptional game, which had happened to be the first time a Vikings rookie back had gotten 100-plus yards in the game since, who else, Adrian Peterson, he would have a much bigger role during the rest of the season. After 2 decent games, after this, he got 64 yards on 18 carries, while still being the second option out of the backfield. He put together another remarkable performance against the Bills, racking up 103 yards on 19 carries. The very next week, he rushed 16 times for 83 yards to complement a solid game by Teddy Bridgewater as they won 19-13 in overtime. After 3 straight consistent games after this, it looked as if he was in a perfect situation to lead the backfield for the rest of the season and lock in his spot as Adrian Peterson's successor. Unfortunately for both him and the Vikings, during the week leading up to the Panthers' November 30th game, he hurt his back and was inactive. Just a week later, on December 6th, he was placed on IR, ending his promising rookie season. His final rushing stats for the year, 113 carries for 538 yards, and his receiving stats, 41 catches for 135 yards, were both up and away from the amount of production that was expected from him in his rookie year. His 4.8 yards per carry was the best on the team, something that would become somewhat of a theme for him. After AP got officially reinstated by the NFL on February 26th, he rejoined the team in June. After a rough first game when he only gained 31 yards on 10 carries, it was speculated around the league that rising star Jet McKinnon would get an increase in snaps and Minnesota would run more of a platoon in the backfield. After being limited in week 1 because of the team's caution towards his previous injury, this was his chance to regain the spotlight that he had had in the last 6 games of his rookie year. Well, there goes that. The season wasn't all bad for Jet, though. He did get his first NFL touchdown in Week 16, with Peterson limited from an injury that he sustained the previous week. But pretty disappointing in all, as he finished with just over half the amount of rushing yards he had the season before, even with leading the team in yards per carry a second straight year. His receiving totals were up a bit, however, thanks to a 4-catch, 76-yard performance in Week 15. In their wildcard loss against Seattle, he wasn't given much of an opportunity, with 7 yards on just 2 carries and 3 catches for 22 yards. 2016 started with another big opportunity. In Week 3, AP tore his meniscus and was ruled out for the remainder of the year. To the outside world, the decision of who would start was easy. The 25-year-old explosive back who excelled at both running and catching the ball, or the 30-year-old out of his prime and slower back. But yeah, they somehow chose Asiata to be the starter. This didn't stop Jet from leading the rushing attack with 45 yards on 16 carries in Week 4. By the end of the season, he was number 1 on the Vikings depth chart, but was still splitting carries with Asiata, and while he did finish with more carries, he finished with less yards in his rookie year. Once again, though, he did improve his receiving totals, up almost 50 yards from 2015. While Minnesota could never have predicted it, this decision to not make Jet the feature back was the last time he'd ever have a true chance at becoming one. In the offseason, Peterson signed with the Saints on April 25th, and the Vikings didn't re-sign Matt Asiata. What you're probably waiting for is how Jet's chances at being the lead back were ruined, and here they are, right on schedule. A month earlier, the team signed former Raiders powerback Latavius Murray, and in the second round of the 2017 draft, they drafted Florida State star Dalvin Cook. A few months removed from McKinnon's best overall season, even though he didn't get running back 1 snaps, he was now number 3 on the running back depth chart. After a strong start to the season by Cook, his season ended prematurely when in Week 4 he tore his ACL, moving Jet up to 2nd on the depth chart. In his contract year, even with Murray the starting running back, Jet became a full-on Swiss Army knife, carving up defenses week after week. When teams were focused on stifling the big Latavius Murray, Case Keenum and the dominant Vikings offense would let the 5'9", 200-pound Jerick McKinnon loose. After getting just 10 carries and 8 receptions through the first 5 weeks of the season, he blasted off and finished the year with career highs in rushing yards, receiving yards, and rushing and receiving touchdowns, with a total of 991 all-purpose yards in the year, 570 of which were on the ground, and the other 421 through the air. The 1-2 punch of Murray and McKinnon not only bulldozed Minnesota all the way into the NFC Championship, with little helps from Stephon Diggs, but revived Jet's career all the way to the point of the 49ers giving him a 4-year, $30 million contract in the 2018 offseason. After San Fran lost their previous starting running back Carlos Hyde to the Browns in free agency, they brought in McKinnon to lead a backfield that included viable backup Matt Breida and veteran Alfred Morris. Now what many of you are probably thinking is, what about this? While Minnesota could never have predicted it, this decision to not make Jet the feature back was the last time he'd ever have a true chance at becoming one. Jet came in at the top of the depth chart with a shiny new contract and a ton of confidence. He excelled in off-season workouts and was poised for a great season. But on September 1st, while participating in a team workout to gear up for the year, McKinnon tore his ACL, ending his running back 1 opportunity before it even got off the ground. After a very good plug-and-play season by Breida and the solid play by Morris, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson Jr., there was much discussion around the NFL community as to how McKinnon would fit in to the increasingly crowded backfield. Well, that decision was made on August 31st, 2019, when he suffered a setback from his knee surgery and would subsequently miss the entire 2019 season. In that same offseason, the Niners would bring in free agent Tevin Coleman, and he was named the starter. Morris left for New York, so the backfield would consist of Coleman, Breida, and the one with the best season out of the 3, Mostert, who finished with over 750 yards on the year. They would make it all the way to the Super Bowl before blowing a 20-10 lead and falling to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Jet would be activated prior to the 2020 season and would reluctantly agree to a restructure of his contract that would pay him a $910,000 base salary for the 2020 season and make it the last on his deal. He played more games than any of the others in the backfield, appearing in every game of the season, but only finished with 319 rushing yards and 253 receiving, the third option behind Wilson and Mostert, with Breida gone and Coleman dealing with injuries the whole season. In what time he got, he played extremely well, but in the offseason he was visibly upset with the Niners restructuring his contract and publicly said that he would not be returning on an Instagram Live with former teammate Deebo Samuel.
Hey, Jet, they asking you a question, bro. Somebody says you staying with the Niners, Jet?
Am I staying with the Niners? No. Hell, you talking about? We go.
After a promising 803-yard, 5-touchdown rookie season by 2020 first-round pick Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Chiefs gave McKinnon a 1-year, $990,000 contract, a true prove-it deal for the 28-year-old Jet to aid their rushing and passing game. After only collecting 38 rushing yards and 81 receiving yards for the first 6 weeks of the year, he was put on injured reserve once again a week later. In his absence, Darrell Williams played very well in the weeks the CEH missed due to injury, and so did 27-year-old Derek Gore. Jet was able to come back in the final weeks of the season and tallied 50 total scrimmage yards and a receiving touchdown. With Helaire ruled out for the wildcard game, Jet rose to the occasion and had one of the best games of his career. He led the Chiefs' offense in rushing with 62 yards on 12 carries and finished second on the team in receiving with 6 grabs for 81 yards and a touchdown. He would continue to carry a decent-sized workload in their last 2 playoff games and finish the postseason with 150 rushing yards and 165 receiving yards, both sizable totals and more than he eclipsed in 7 regular season games he played in. His performance was enough to get a raise from Kansas City, as he re-signed with them in June on a 1-year deal for $1.25 million. His future is very uncertain going into the 2022 season with the Chiefs. CEH is currently listed at the top of the depth chart, with Jet at number 2. Rookie Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers has garnered a lot of hype throughout training camp. As the hype surrounding Helaire has lowered, there is a chance that when the season ends, Pacheco and McKinnon will have gotten most of the snaps. His injury history is certainly a concern, but he's a well-respected vet in KC and has some potential opportunities that could open up in the next year or two. Every year from 2014 to 2020, something was always in McKinnon's path to becoming a star running back. Whether it was Matt Asiata, Adrian Peterson, injuries, or heck even the Vikings coaching staff. McKinnon has worked to get snaps every year and has been a consistent producer in all 6 seasons he's played in so far. While we cannot say what the future holds for Jet, it is almost a certainty that he will find a way to stick around and put up solid numbers for whatever team he plays for.